Alright, so hi guys. So this video is basically just an introduction to Kaggle, which is the platform that we're going to be using to host all the competitions. So in lots of Kaggle is basically a platform that hosts data science competitions, right? And in all these competitions, usually you have some input, like some training data, and you want to train a machine learning model that learns the relationship between different parts of this training data, right? In this, so usually the machine learning models, they input these things called features, and then they want to output something called a label, right? And this can be a sort of regression task where the output is supposed to be some sort of continuous um, thing. Like maybe the inputs that you're giving to the model are like, maybe you're trying to predict the price of a house given the number of bedrooms it has, the number of bathrooms it has, maybe the district, like the school district that it's in. And so all the things that I just mentioned would be like your features, and the label would be the price of the house, right, in whatever currency you want. And so that's a form of regression where you're trying to perform when you're trying to output some sort of continuous variable. Another type is like classification, where like in this problem here, we give you a lot of information about a certain patient, like a medical patient. So we give you their age, their gender, height, weight, different types of blood pressure, cholesterol, glucose levels, whether or not they smoke, whether or not they consume alcohol, and whether they exercise in some sort of way. And then your goal is to predict, do they have some sort of cardiovascular disease, right? So this is not regression where we're trying to predict some continuous output. Instead, you're actually just trying to predict um, whether or not a certain person or certain entity in your data set falls into some group, and that's classification. There can be like two classes that you're trying to classify into, three, or how many ever you want. And so this is kind of the screen that you'll see when you navigate to the contest one of this competition. So this is basically, I'm just going to walk through like how to use this platform, and submit your predictions once you have them. So you know you won't actually be submitting any code to Kaggle itself. There are some competitions where we're asking you to submit your code through email to us, but those are some of the advanced competitions, so you don't have to worry about that for now. Um, but all you have to do in Kaggle is actually just submit your predictions for some data that we give you. We'll give you the features for some data, and then you have to submit your predictions for that data, right? And then that's all it is. It's like one small file. The format is called CSV, uh, um, and it's just a very simple file format. Um, and then Kaggle will check your accuracy, and then it will update this leaderboard. Currently, there are no entries, but yeah, that's basically what will go down, right? So you know, all of the competitions have some information about the data set that we provided, and so you can look at that here, right? Like what is being provided to you in that data set. The actual data that you should download is in this tab right here, right? And so I'll walk through these are the three main files for this competition. So train.csv is basically a CSV file that has all of basically, when you're training your machine learning model, you need data that has both your features and your labels, right? In order to teach it. And then once the machine learning model knows the relationship between all the variables, then you can just give it the features and try to get it to predict the output, if that makes sense. So as I mentioned before, all the features in this are these things, right? Like we're giving you all these things, and the goal of your machine learning model is to predict whether or not this person has some sort of cardiovascular disease. Um, and so this is basically the training file that has a bunch of different records of a bunch of different people, and so we give you all of the age, gender, height, weight, and everything. Uh, 1 second. Let me just make sure. Okay, so we give you age, gender, height, weight, the blood pressures, cholesterol, glucose, etc. And we also give you the answers, right? We give you whether or not they have a cardiovascular disease. Here, 0 being that they don't have one, and 1 being they do have one. And so this is kind of like you have all the answers, right? And so this is what you use to teach your machine learning model the relationship between all of these variables, and then the last one, cardio, right? So once you do that, hopefully your model learns well, right? It learns the relationship well. And then the end goal is to be able to predict this column when given all the other columns, right? And so this is actually what you'll be submitting. You'll be submitting those predictions. So, one sec. This is basically the test.csv file. So here there's an added column called the ID. Kaggle just when you make your submissions, you have to have this ID column with you. And that's reflected in the shell code that we provided for this competition as well. But just make sure that you have this. But basically, for the test.csv file, this is a bunch of different entities where we have we give you the age, gender, height, weight, blood pressures, cholesterol, glucose, smoking, alcohol, and active, but we don't give you the whether or not they have some sort of cardiovascular disease. That's your job. You're supposed to predict whether or not they have a cardiovascular disease. And you do this, we have a shellcode that does all the file formatting, at least for this competition. So if you don't have too much experience with like Python or like writing stuff to files and stuff, we'll take care of you for the first competition. And basically, yeah, this is the test file. And so you give all of this to your machine learning model, and then you're supposed to predict whether or not they have a cardiovascular disease. Now, the thing that you submit to Kaggle is in this form, right? There's two columns, the ID, which I mentioned before, and also cardio, right? And so this is kind of a stupid answer. Like we just, for the sample submission, I basically like everything was a 0, right? I just said everybody does not have a cardiovascular disease. But the point of having this sample submission is to just show you the format that you should take when submitting to Kaggle, right? You have to have this ID, and you have your second column that represents your answer. This may be different from some competitions, like for example, for competition 6, the goal is to actually output coordinates of bounding boxes. So that'll be a bit different, but at least for the first few competitions, this format should stay pretty similar. Um, and so once you have this CSV file, on your computer, then when you're ready to submit, you can go to Submit Predictions, this black button on the top right corner, and then you upload your prediction here, and then you say Make Submission. There are some things to note. Every In the span of 24 hours, you have 20 submissions, right? So the reason why Kaggle has put this restriction, and the reason that we're keeping it that way, is because we don't want you to like keep spamming predictions with just like slightly different results. Each submission should reflect like a fundamental change that you make. I mean, you can try to max out all 20 submissions, but this is just like for your sake, right? Try not to like just spam submissions. Try to focus on making your model's accuracy better, and then only submit once you think there's been a fundamental improvement compared to your last submission, right? Some other things to note are that on the leaderboard, you'll see this note here. So what during the time when the competition is running, the results on this leaderboard will be calculated using 30% of the test data, right? So what this means is that Kaggle will see your it'll check only 30% of your answers and see if they match the actual correct answers. But then after the competition is over, the final results will be based off of 70% of your of the data, right? So there may be like it may be that you're in second place um, using on the public leaderboard, but then on the private leaderboard you actually go down a bit, and that's fine. The reason why that happens is so that we're just trying to prevent any overfitting to the test data set, if that makes sense, right? You can keep like incrementally changing small things to try to see if your um, performance on the test data set goes well, but having this sort of like split here discourages like incremental tampering. So that's actually like a good thing. So yeah, that's just a note. Like you may see that your standings change slightly um, after the competition is over. So yeah, just take note of that. Um, and other than that, that's basically it. That's an introduction to Kaggle.